Good afternoon, everyone. With a quorum now being present, I call to order the January 25th, 2024 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and the video will be posted on the Trust website, and a stenographer will provide a transcript of the meeting. The directors have received the agenda materials in advance of this meeting and are free to ask questions or comments at any time on the action items submitted for approval today. Please note, however, questions or comments from the audience will not be entertained at this meeting. I note that the board memos and resolutions on today's agenda have been posted on the Trust website in the link entitled Board Meetings, Bylaws, and Other Materials under Board Agendas and Minutes, and thus are available to the public. There are 9 items on the consent agenda. 1, approval of minutes and ratification of the actions taken at the December 7th, 2023 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. 2, ratification and approval of extension of contract term with Billy and Oyster Project for Tribeca Habitat Enhancement Project. 3, ratification and approval of the extension of contract term with Olin Partnership Ltd. for Pier 26 Landscape Architect Services. 4, approval of extension of contract term with Melk Urban Design LLC for Pier 97 Landscape Architectural Services. 5, approval of extension of contract terms for Gansevoort Peninsula Building Construction Contractors. 6, approval of extension of contract term with Stantec Consulting Services, Inc. for owner's representative for capital projects and strategic planning. 7, ratification and approval of extension of contract term with Alpine Construction and Landscaping Corp. for Chelsea Waterside Park Phase 2 General Construction. 8, approval of extension of contract term with Deborah Bradley Construction and Management Services, Inc. for on-call general contracting services. And 9, ratification and approval of extension of contract term with CH2M Hill Engineering for Pier 40 Structural Restoration Engineering Services. Unless anyone has any comments, I will now call for a motion to approve all of the 9 items on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Seconded? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The first corporate action before the board is authorization to contract with Marvel Architects, Landscape Architects, Urban Designers, PLLC, for design and related consultant services for the West 29 to West 46th Streets Landscape and Esplanade. Ms. Doyle.
Thank you. Excluding Pier 40 and Pier 76, the area between West 29th and West 46th Streets is the last major section of the park that has not yet been improved. The area encompasses a number of existing commercial and governmental uses, making it a complex design and ultimately construction project. The trust has a combination of state, city, and proceeds from previous sales of unused development rights available for construction, and now seeks to retain a qualified consultant to provide comprehensive planning, design, and phased construction document packages, construction administration, and various related services for the area. In accordance with the Trust procurement guidelines, the RFP for design and related consultant services for West 29th to West 46th Street Landscape and Esplanade was published in the New York State Contract Reporter and on the Trust website between the period of June 29th and August 21st, 2023, and the Trust received 8 proposals on the submission deadline. A selection committee comprised of Trust staff reviewed the submissions and evaluated each according to the identified selection criteria in the RFP. After evaluating proposals, the selection committee, joined by board members of the Trust Design Committee, conducted interviews of the top proposers, and the result was that Marvel Architects, Landscape Architects, Urban Planners, PLLC, was determined to provide the best value to the Trust. Marvel is a New York State certified MBE and will partially meet the advertised 6% SDVOD goal. Marvel has experience providing similar services for government agencies, including the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, New York City Department of Design and Construction, and Battery Park City Authority. Trust staff request authorization by the Board of Directors to enter into a contract with Marble Architects, Landscape Architects, Urban Designers, PLLC, for design and related consultant services for the West 29th to West 46th Street Landscape and Esplanade project in the amount of $8,563,399, plus a 10% contingency, for a total board authorization amount of up to $9,419,739. Funding for the contract is available through New York State and will require filing with the Office of the State Controller.
Are there any questions or comments?
Yes.
This company made already any work for the trust before?
No, this would be the first time working with us. Okay. There are staff members, including Kevin Quinn, our Senior VP of Design and Construction, who has directly worked with them before in his previous job at City Parks.
Other questions or comments? If not, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to contract with Marble Architects, Landscape Architects, Urban Designers, PLLC for design and related consultant services for the West 29 to West 46th Streets Landscape and Esplanade.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The second corporate action item before the board is authorization to approve the selection of New York Water Tours, Inc. for Pier 40 marine uses.
The trust and its predecessor agencies have hosted robust commercial marine operations at Pier 40 for decades. For approximately the past decade, Hornblower operated vessels for sightseeing and meal service cruises and charters along the northern and western perimeters of Pier 40 under a permit issued following a competitive procurement that has now expired. In compliance with the Trust's guidelines for revenue-generating contracts, on August 22nd, 2023, the Trust released an RFP for Pier 40 marine uses that was advertised in the New York State Contract Reporter and on the Trust website and emailed to an extensive mailing list developed by Trust staff. As noted in the RFP, the Trust sought proposals from reputable vessel owners and operators that will generate needed revenue to help support park operations while also being good neighbors both to the larger surrounding park and to the inland residential neighborhood. The premises offered include the northern and western docking areas of Pier 40, as well as 3 separate optional interior spaces that may be used for passenger processing, storage, and ancillary administrative and service functions. The Trust received 9 proposals on the submission due date of October 5th, 2023. A selection committee consisting of Trust staff in the real estate, legal, and public safety departments reviewed all proposals and interviewed the 7 respondents that submitted administratively complete proposals. Following the interviews, the selection committee ranked all proposals based on the criteria set forth in the RFP, and then interviewed the top 2 shortlisted respondents to further understand each respondent's proposed plans for pedestrian and vehicular traffic management, trash management, deliveries, vessel schedule management, community coordination, noise control, and safety and security. Based on review of the proposals, interviews, and references, the selection committee has determined that proceeding with New York Water Tours, Inc. to negotiate a concession agreement would be in the best interest of the Trust. Because the Trust's adopted revenue guidelines require board approval of the selection for any revenue contract with a base fee of $500,000 or more, staff seeks consent by the board to allow staff to proceed with finalizing and executing a concession agreement. New York Water Tours proposes to dock 6 vessels offering brunch, dinner, family, and kid-focused cruises and sightseeing and adult social cruises with a mixture of ticketing available to the general public and for private events. The company will also use the interior space for passenger processing, sales, and marketing, and the storage of supplies and materials, similar to Hornblower's use of the interior space. New York Water Tours proposes a base concession fee starting at approximately $845,549 for the first year, with annual escalations during the 9-year contract period, as well as percentage rent set at 12% of the year-over-year gross revenue increase. To minimize the potential for quality of life impacts to the neighboring residential community, the Trust intends to limit the frequency of late-night cruises by requiring the majority of excursions to return to Pier 40 by no later than 11 p.m., except on certain pre-authorized occasions. The trust also plans to initially limit operations by third parties to ensure that New York Water Tours, as the sole operator, will directly handle, coordinate, and be responsible for all logistics and operations. Trust staff has prepared a draft concession agreement using the trust's form of concession that has been granted to other concessionaires operating in the park, and which includes terms similar to those previously incorporated in the now expired hornblower permit. Such concession agreement will include exhibits setting forth New York Water Tours security plan, signage plan, operating procedure, and vehicle access plan. The recommended contract term is 5 years, with the option for two-year extensions at the discretion of the trust. Trust staff requests board authorization to approve the selection of New York Water Tours, Inc. for Pier 40 marine uses, subject to successful negotiation of the concession agreement. Staff will return to the board in the event of a substantive reduction in the proposed rent or a substantive change in the premises arises prior to the concession agreement execution.
Are there any questions or comments?
Yes.
One question. Is there anything built in to incentivize them to, you're starting to see some EV ferries and the like. Is there anything in the contract built in to incentivize them to do that?
It's not an incentive. I believe that I think that they don't. I believe that they own a lot of these boats already, and since they're so expensive, they are sort of just when they have a schedule for purchasing new greener boats. And we did actually reference our interest in greener boats as part of the RFP process, but they're not required, as I recall.
Yeah, they're also, but we are required them to go higher tier at EPA standards. So I think the concession will require, I think, 1 or 2 of their vessels to convert to at least a tier 4. Yeah, but it costs money. It's not cheap to do.
It's and I would say, in addition, it is likely that the overall electrical infrastructure for Pier 40 would need a massive upgrade as well in order to have the total number of vessels operating under that. Kevin, would that be correct?
Yeah, it's safe to assume.
Yeah.
I have a question about the 12% of the year-over-year gross revenue increase. So that means that if their revenue increase is 10%, we would have a 1.2% increase?
I don't think that's correct.
So tell me how it works.
There's basically there's a base rent that's going to go up.
Right.
You know, we're still negotiating, but there's a table and actually a base rent. But then there's also the ability of getting concession percentage rent if they have a large increase, and then we would get 12% of that. So basically, if there's an increase in their gross sales beyond what we originally planned, we would get 12% of that increase in their gross sales. So if they have say $1 million in gross sales this year, next year they're at like 1.2 million. We get 12% of that 200,000 as percentage rent. So it go each year it goes up. It's a little bit confusing, how to explain that in the board memo.
You said the annual escalator hadn't been determined yet?
It has been. I didn't bring the draft contract. We can share that all with you, but there is a full rent proposal that required the escalations and everything. And so the proposed form of concession that has not yet, as I understand it, been delivered to the entity, if you wanted to come to me first, has that specifically spelled out in it.
It's usually like 3.5% increase each year in base. And then if they do a good gross in revenue, then we get the percentage rent.
So we can share all of this with you, but the percentage rent also, Christine, going back to that, is that that is pretty typical for a type of rent that we negotiate as part of many of our food and beverage related concessions in particular, where alcohol sales or performance-based things can be a sizable additional form of rent for us.
Yeah, I was not understanding the
calculation. Okay.
I had a hard time following the calculation. And then the 845, is that consistent with what was?
I would say it's an improvement.
Okay.
The previous one actually was tied to some specific parking garage spaces, and in this case, we eliminated that. So the net is probably likely to be similar when you look at the additional parking assumptions previously.
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly higher than Hornblower with the base rent, but also Hornblower could go to 1 a.m., 2 a.m. We've restricted the hours, and we also we're not allowing third-party use by third-party operators. So it's
apples to apples.
It's not apples. So Hornblower, yeah. So we restricted the time, and so less nuisance, but we also get a little bit.
Yeah, from the get-go, we basically determined that we need a successful operator, which means a successful operator with the community as well. And so it was not all about the highest proposal. It rarely is with the park. It's also about how does it fit into the community and the park overall.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? If not, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to approve the selection of New York Water Tours, Inc. for Pier 40 marine uses, subject to the trust successfully negotiating a concession agreement with New York Water Tours.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you.
All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The third corporate action item before the board is authorization to amend the contract with EJ Electric Installation Company for Gansevoort Peninsula electrical construction. Ms. Doyle.
And in 2021 meeting, the board authorized the trust to enter into a contract with EJ Electric Installation Company to install lighting, power distribution, and other electrical components, needed for the new park area at the Gansevoort Peninsula. At the September 2022 meeting, the board authorized an amendment to the contract for the relocation and replacement of an electric utility line and the installation of conduit to support an automated vehicular control feature at the entrance to the Gansevoort Peninsula for a total board authorization amount of up to $1,839,085. Following the Gansevoort Peninsula's opening on October 2nd, 2023, the trust has observed that lighting levels on the south side of the site, which were intentionally designed to allow for a naturalistic shoreline edge as compared to that at various paved areas, should be increased somewhat to optimize security and visibility. The design team recommends installing 2 custom lights that would be attached to the existing sports light poles and aimed towards the south edge that would increase light levels while minimizing light spillover onto the water or the day's end installation. The trust staff requests board authorization to amend the contract with EJ Electric Installation Company for Gansevoort Peninsula electrical construction for an additional amount of $49,365 for a total board authorized amount of up to $1,888,450. Funding for the amendment to the EJ contract is available from capital funds allocated by the City of New York.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? If not, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to amend the contract with EJ Electric Installation Company for Gansevoort Peninsula electrical construction. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The fourth corporate action item before the board is adoption of the 2024 procurement guidelines. Ms. Doyle?
The trust procurement guidelines detail the policies for awarding, monitoring, and reporting of procurement contracts pursuant to Article 9 of the Public Authorities Law. Since the last update to the trust procurement guidelines in 2023, the State of New York, through its Office of General Services and based on recommendations from the State Procurement Council, has released new procurement guidelines. The trust staff has reviewed the state procurement guidelines and has proposed conforming edits to the trust guidelines. As shared with the board, these include clarification of certain types of procurements, along with additional details for preferred sources, discretionary, and piggyback procurements. Trust staff thus seeks board approval of the Hudson River Park Trust 2024 procurement guidelines.
Are there any questions or comments?
Is any of those changes is going to impact or change the way you do business?
I would say that there is a modest change to the piggybacking requirement. So previously, we were allowed to contact an agency if we thought perhaps they had purchased widgets and a huge number of widgets and say, we'd like to be able to find out who you used for that, and then we would be able to piggyback onto that contract and secure the same pricing for our needs. Now there is a requirement, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, that we have to intentionally notify the agency, and that intent to piggyback has to be communicated as part of the initial procurement. So there is still an opportunity with someone like Battery Park City or State Parks, perhaps, where we could all think about team purchasing. But it is a slightly higher bureaucratic standard for us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Chris, I said that correctly?
Yep. We also have to get Office of General Services approval. That is another layer.
And this change was mandated by the Office of General Services, right?
Yeah, it's a controller guidance that required it. Yep.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will call for a motion for the board to adopt the Trust 2024 procurement guidelines. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. Thank you. That completes the board action items for approval today. I would now like to ask Ms. Doyle to present the president's report.
Yesterday, the Finance Committee convened your presentation of the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2025. Kim Quinones is recovering from COVID. She's authorized me to actually say that to you. And so I will provide an overview of the document. Before doing so, I will also note that pursuant to the requirements of the state finance law, the document is posted on the Trust website and in various locations in the park, where it will remain for at least 60 days. During this period, staff will continue to refine the budget, after which time we will present the proposed budget to the Finance Committee in March. Subsequently, we will ask the full board to review and adopt the final proposed fiscal year 2025 budget at the next meeting, now scheduled for either March 26th or March 28th, and I'm going to be circling back to you to discuss meeting logistics at the end of this meeting. And you all have a copy of the preliminary proposed budget in front of you if you'd like to follow along. Also, I'd like to provide an overview of projected spending for the current fiscal year FY 2024 against the adopted 2024 budget before describing the 2025 preliminary proposed budget. You may recall that the adopted budget for the current fiscal year included significant growth in various budget categories, including personal services, contracted public safety services, contracted janitorial and maintenance services, lights and utilities, and even certain supply costs. These increases were driven partly by our expectation that 7.5 new acres of public open space, including 3 new public bathrooms, would all have opened during the good weather portions of the park year, but also by inflationary pressures in many areas, ranging from supplies to rentals to construction costs. As you know, the Gansevoort Peninsula did not open until early October, and the public restrooms there have not yet opened. Pier 97 has just partially opened, but again, not yet the restrooms. As a result of these delays, staff has deferred spending in many of the budgeted areas, with the result that projected spend for the current fiscal year is significantly less than the original document in certain categories. The proposed budget for FY 2025 reflects implementation of most of these increases, as Gansevoort and Pier 97 will now be open on a nearly full year basis. There are also some additional explanations for certain anticipated spend being below budget in the current fiscal year. First, in a few cases, the budget included allocations that would only be spent in the event of an offsetting revenue source was available for the expense. For example, the general consultant budget included an allocation of $150,000 for a habitat research project at Gansevoort, but the federal grant from NOAA has not yet come through. Similarly, the Trust is also carrying a budget assumption for various professional engineering and legal services related to the Gateway Rail Tunnel project, for which the Trust does not control the schedule. For examples like these, the corresponding expenditures have been deferred into 2025. Second, independent of the new staff positions that were deferred given the status of new park openings, the Trust has a number of vacancies, including in areas where we have struggled to fill new positions, such as certain facilities positions. Last, given the extensive new construction that has occupied staff time this year, certain capital maintenance spend has lagged given bandwidth and time needed to complete various required procurements. On the income side, you'll remember that at the last meeting, we reported that the trust would be receiving a one-time payment for Chelsea Piers related to a lease transaction that was not known when the budget was adopted. As discussed with the Finance Committee, the payment of approximately $8.6 million was unbudgeted, as it was not anticipated, and is non-recurring, but obviously it significantly boosts the projected income for the current fiscal year. Income is also higher than projected for a few other reasons, but primarily because various tenants, including Chelsea Piers and Circle Line, had strong years, resulting in higher percentage rent payments to the trust. Classic Car Club, located on a portion of Pier 76, was expected to cease its occupancy in early summer 2023, but this use will now extend until June 2024, and rental payments to the trust are higher as a result of the negotiated extension. The result is that on an operating basis, staff projects an operating surplus of $22.7 million before accounting for capital maintenance. Without the one-time Chelsea Piers transaction rent, the operating surplus would be approximately $14 million. After the costs of capital maintenance projected to occur in the current fiscal year are factored in, and excluding the one-time transaction rent, the trust expects the projected net surplus to be approximately $6.6 million. As you know, the trust uses excess operating revenue to fund the costs of most capital maintenance, as government funds for this purpose are hard to come by. I'll explain. After a period of several straight years of intense new construction funded primarily by New York State and New York City, staff now expects that the next couple of years will be focused more on capital maintenance, which is not otherwise funded. So this excess income is particularly welcome at this juncture, though not something we can count on annually. I'll now shift to a summary of the proposed preliminary budget for FY 2025, which assumes total revenue of just over $40 million. Of this amount, approximately $13 million is projected from the Pier 40 parking, net of parking taxes, or approximately 32% of projected revenue. I'd like to thank and acknowledge Robert Wynn, our VP of Real Estate, for his masterful management of this complicated asset. Of course, we also expect to spend approximately $12.6 million on capital maintenance at Pier 40, as this pier continues to suffer from a variety of structural issues, though no longer serious pile concerns. Lease income is also expected to increase, with staff no longer factoring in a pandemic discount for tenants with participation rent, as evidenced by the strong performance of Chelsea Piers and Circle Line this year. The budget also assumes that Classic Car Club will cease in June and remains conservative for the heliport. Hudson River Park Friends is conducting its budgeting process at present, so the amount assumed as a contribution from Friends is conservative at present. Overall, staff is projecting total revenue of $40.3 million, an 8% increase against the FY 2024 revenue budget. On the expense side, we're projecting a total of $35.4 million in budgeted operating expenses, inclusive of personal services, which is a 6.5% increase as compared to the FY 2024 budget. This produces a budgeted net operating surplus of nearly $5 million, but again, that's before capital maintenance net of reimbursement from restricted funds. Once capital maintenance of approximately $12 million is factored in, an annual deficit of $7 million is budgeted for FY 2025. If this deficit is realized, it would be funded from trust reserves. Again, we'll update these FY 25 budget numbers in March as necessary and return to the Finance Committee and the board with a final proposed budget to be considered at the March 28th board meeting. The approved budget will then be posted on our website and at 5 locations located throughout the park. I'd like to thank Kim Quinones, who of course leads our finance and real estate teams. I'm sure she would have liked to have been here today directly. And in addition, I especially appreciate the work of Secunda Zuberi, our VP of Finance, who worked closely with department heads and the trust executives to prepare the preliminary proposed budget, and Robert Wynn, who developed income projections and who's also responsible for overall lease management as well as the parking garage. And I'm sure there are some questions. Yes.
I think this is, I think this is not I'm gonna be stupid on this question. The surplus New York State and New York City reimbursements and the available government restricted park funds, they're coming from some other source.
Correct. So if you look at New York State and New York City reimbursement and at the line above it for insurance,
Yeah.
you'll remember maybe that the 2013 amendment to the Hudson River Park Act requires the state and city to pay for overall liability proportionately for Hudson River Park.
Right.
So that's what that portion is. It's handled differently between the state and the city, but that's that one.
Okay.
And then there are other reimbursements from other state entities such as state DOT, for example, for maintaining the medians and the certain snow removal activities and other things like that, that is also built into this.
And do you also apply for other public grants?
We do. We apply for, a good example would be for Pier 97. We applied for a TAP grant, a transportation enhancement, well, it used to be TAP and now I forget what the A is, whatever, but for the Esplanade area in the vicinity of Pier 97, that's actually federal transportation money that is funding that, but it comes via New York State. And that's in part why that area will not open at the same time as Pier 97 and the Upland area because of the additional processes needed for that. But that is in our capital budget allocation as opposed to the capital maintenance or operating budget. So that is they're two separate things. Yeah. Director Kaplan, the chair of the finance committee, was not able to be here today. He I think generally believes that we budget conservatively, but he
said so explicitly. He said so explicitly.
I think you were too conservative.
Yeah. Right. But you said appropriate.
Appropriate, you didn't say that.
Would any other members who were part of the finance committee like to say anything, or are there other questions? Okay, so we obviously have more work to do as we bring the fiscal year to a close and as we continue to have eventualities happen and thoughts and so forth. But normally it would be somewhat surprising if we had radical changes for you between now and I'll say there's one other thing that's out there as another unexpected potential revenue source, which is the Gateway Tunnel permanent easement payment. We don't quite know when that is going to hit our bank accounts. It might be this year, it might be next year, and that would be about another $8.6 million that would appear as non-recurring revenue.
And Noreen, that does not include any disruption that the work there might, right?
Correct. There will be a separate construction permit and a negotiation related to that disruption.
And that's far out.
No, it is not far out. They're actually telling us that they will start some work in the park next year.
Next year?
Mm-hmm.
The 8.6 million is the one time, is it like a licensing fee or what is it?
There's two payments of roughly that amount. So the Chelsea Piers one is the transaction payment. And the Gateway Tunnel one is related to the permanent easement of the tunnel below a section of the park, which limits our ability to do certain things above that area. And therefore we did an appraisal and were able to get consensus that that was the appropriate amount to pay us.
So if we look at the FY24 approved budget, there was no one-time transaction rent. We got that from Chelsea. And you're saying for FY25, there could be another one-time?
It's possible that it's possible that again in FY 2024, depending on when the
one-time it'd be sooner, I see what you're saying.
Another 8 million.
But at this point, it's not factored.
It's not in the budget anywhere.
It is not at this point because we neither anticipated it nor do we have the payment yet, though it was approved.
And we're conservative.
That one
Appropriately.
Exactly. In that vein, for the FY25 budget, is there anything in the $40.3 million revenues that's not essentially locked in at this point? Is there any risk to that number? I mean, there's upside potential, obviously, but is there anything that's a big variable that's not locked in?
Arguably, congestion pricing is one of the things that could have a very, very big impact on the trust because of the 2,000 space parking garage that we operate at Pier 40. We know a lot about our parking customers. Most of them, and we are limited to start with having the Hudson River Park Act has a cap, and it's a low cap on the number of daily parkers that we're allowed to have. So almost all the parking at Pier 40 is monthly parking. And given that most of the monthly parkers are nearby residents who often are taking their car out on weekends or summertime and not necessarily every day of the week, we're sort of hoping that the impact of congestion pricing on us is not radical. But I think no one out there knows what congestion pricing is going to do to anyone, really. So that is, I would say, in a category of bigger risk than most things. As I said, Classic Car Club, we had been in a period where we had accepted, because of the bankruptcy filing, and much reduced rent. And when we allowed them, because of a very specific agreement that we were able to reach with them with a still date certain for when they're moving into a building nearby, when that materialized in the midst of the fiscal year, and again, that was not something we anticipated, the rent reverted to kind of the equivalent of about $500,000 if it were an annual basis. So that's something that we expect will drop off. That's a change. And then the other risk, and we've been budgeting very conservatively for this for years now, is the heliport. The heliport, as you know from us, there's been legislation introduced repeatedly to terminate the use. So we always assume that that could happen. And so we do not budget for the full operations of the heliport as we could. We are assuming, in fact, that there could be some kind of law or something that just tells us to shut it down.
What's our classic cars? I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to ask, what was our classic car space when they move out? Do we have anything?
We don't have a plan yet. There is some structural work and it's expensive, that needs to happen along the entire buried bulkhead equivalent section. It's a very unusual form of construction that we don't have elsewhere in the park, but basically the entire length of that area needs substantial infrastructure work to the tune of about $5 million probably. And so that ability to ingress and egress, also the area under their tent, right? So there's an exterior area of their premises currently that also needs pretty robust infrastructure work. So until we have accomplished those things, which need regulatory permits and other things like that, we haven't plotted out a kind of use for that. In the short term, we think it has potential value when we do something like a fashion show or whatever on a rental basis, a spot rental basis at Pier 76 as back of the house green room space that they would otherwise have to pay for tents or other things to operate. So it is a potential incentive for rentals on short-term basis. The other thing is that at some point, and this is not quite imminent, but the eastern section of roof above the trust's offices at Pier 40 has not yet been redone. And when that happens, it's likely that we will have to move out in pieces somewhere. And it's possible that depending on what Pier 76 Classic Car Club space is at that point, maybe it's a swing space for a subset of our office if needed. But those are top of mind ideas and not a plan. Sorry? Yeah, in the tent. No, in the actual building. It's probably nicer than Pier 40, just what I want.
Was my impression that during the construction of the gateway, the heliport was going to be affected?
Yes, a portion of the heliport.
And what does it mean for financially for the trust?
Well, that would be part of the negotiation with Gateway in the first instance. If they're the cause, we would say they're the cause. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Okay. feel free, please, to let us know if you have any individual questions about the budget. I'm sure Sikander or Kim would be, or I would be happy to answer them. Okay, we go to the pretty picture section. This was a fantastic week.
Yeah.
This was a fantastic week to be in the park. Those of us who were able to be present when we opened the gates to the new science playground on Tuesday got to watch the first group of children, third graders from St. Luke's, and then some unaffiliated members of the general public swarm gleefully into this incredible new space.
20 degrees?
No, Tuesday was a bit better. It was cold. I would say my feet were cold. It was about 40 degrees.
It's weather running.
We had no speeches though. They just had to finish. Carrie Roble from our River Project team led the kids in a brief casual science conversation before the gates were open. And I got to witness the moment when a little boy, I think next page, that little boy said, excuse me, trying to get her attention so that he could inquire what was my words, anatomical purpose of the ropes at the front of the sturgeon, which are barbels, which are an extrasensory organ that the sturgeon have. So it demonstrated within about 5 minutes of arrival, the dual play science content of this playground. And it's just amazing. And it's also just, it's uplifting in every way. And also just frankly not having, I'm sure Director Frederick can attest to this, not having the fence around that area and just having the open views is also just pretty amazing. So as you know, the playground funding was provided through a successful fundraising campaign from Hudson River Park Friends. Supplemented by funding from the Manhattan Borough President, City Council member Chris Marte, and the entire City Council. And I thank them all once again for this extraordinary gift to New York City and children everywhere. Thank you also to Kevin Quinn and Tom Adams and to Carrie Roble and Tina Walsh of the Trust staff, who combine their design and construction and their environmental and science knowledge to accomplish this incredible project. And the design team was Olin, construction manager Bill Bain, Monstrom fabricated the structures, Alpine, the whole construction team. It's an amazing project.
And we're all still friends.
Okay. As I mentioned at the last meeting, we opened the new dog runs at the Gansevoort Peninsula on December 11th. The first dog to charge into the large run was Ray Ray, there with our celebrity guest, Senator Brad Hoylman.
Wait, is that his dog?
No.
He rented it, saw
Ray has his own social media account, but he also has some other good company, as you can see there too. And otherwise at Gansevoort, work has been proceeding smoothly on the new building, with the public restrooms expected to be open as soon as we receive the temporary certificate of occupancy from the Department of Buildings, which we think will happen before the next board meeting. During the week between Christmas and New Year's, we also opened a large portion of Pier 97 to the public while we continue constructing the built-in seating, overlook platform, and facade at the Belvedere, and make finishing touches to the playground. Meanwhile, we're also advancing construction on the adjacent park building, which includes a restroom, small concession area, and park maintenance hub. We expect to open the full pier along with the restroom facility this spring, and we'll plan a proper public opening celebration at that time. We hope with Governor Hochul, Mayor Adams, other elected officials, community members, and of course, all of you. I will say that we had a very soft opening. We basically opened the gates, but before doing that, we let community stakeholders know that we would be there to offer them tours and answer questions. And there's a very tall slide here. And it's a really radical, different kind of playground. And several of us went, up it, down it.
It was
one
insane.
member of one of our guests went zooming down it very quickly. And I have him on recorded, also gleeful video. Ransom for the future. Okay, as approved by the board today, we plan to enter into the Marvel contract quickly so that we can begin getting the consultant team on board and oriented, after which we will introduce them publicly to the community. We're very much looking forward to the start of planning and community engagement for this area of the park, which I think we can all agree deserves some love and attention. Some of you have no doubt seen photos and video of flooding along portions of the Esplanade in the area north of Pier 40 and south of the Gansevoort Peninsula and in Tribeca on January 13th. The flooding occurred in the morning while joggers and others were out in force on a day that began exceptionally warm. Other areas of the city were also impacted by the combination of high tide, a lot of previous rain in the city, and upstate snowmelt. On an immediate basis, our maintenance, operations, and facility staff, under Rob Rodriguez here, worked closely with PEP officers and the Doe Fund to temporarily close affected areas of the park. Once water receded, they also cleaned the debris and quickly reopened the Esplanade. I appreciate their quick response to the unexpected event on a weekend when fewer staff members were overall on duty. We continue to discuss internally how best to plan for and quickly respond to these types of flooding events in the future, as they are an inevitable occurrence given climate change. Big picture, park elevations on the Esplanade and the pier entrances are established by the combination of Route 9A, the historic bulkhead, and ADA requirements, and previously discussed in the context of Battery Park City and Army Corps resiliency projects, there are no easy solutions. Hudson River Park was designed in anticipation that it would need to be resilient in the face of some flooding, and there was no damage from the recent flooding event, but we may not always be so lucky. As we commence planning for the new park area from 29th to 46th Streets, we'll certainly be looking for opportunities to reduce the likelihood of future flooding in that area. Our facilities, maintenance, horticulture, and operations team continue to do an amazing job in maintaining the park, including responding to our first 2 snowfalls in 2 years. I'm very thankful to our PEP officers who are out in the field on some very frigid days and nights, assisting homeless persons and others in the park that may need assistance during these bitterly cold winter nights.
How long did that last? How long was the closure?
A matter of hours. I mean, not long at all. It essentially, high tide was at 8:30 in the morning. This started happening about 9:30, and it ebbed pretty quickly, but it nevertheless requires cleanup and barriers.
This was north of Pier 40 or south? South.
Both. So we have a known low spot near Horatio Street, so south of Gansevoort, and that extends a stretch south. But not all the way to Pier 40. And then areas of Tribeca, Canal Street. Canal Street is
Canal Street.
Yes.
But did the highway get flooded when this happened?
No, not to my knowledge. Neither did all the plant. The plant areas mostly did not either. It was confined. This, in the moments where it was surging, it was pretty dramatic, but it was not a total flood condition. Okay. To the extent there's a quiet season in Parks Land, we're in the midst of it now, though as you can no doubt tell, things are never very quiet here. That said, across the trust, we're taking advantage of the season to do planning in various areas. On that note, our Public Programs Department is hard at work developing their schedule for the 2024 season. Earlier this month, the Trust River Project team hosted our 3rd annual Estuarine Sanctuary Management Science Sanctuary meeting. Regional experts, local university and college faculty members, environmental partners, and the Research and Habitat Enhancement Subcommittee of our Technical Advisory Committee joined our staff to present and discuss current or recent research projects happening in the park and some future priorities. Members of our team shared updates on our 7 internal research projects, including fish ecology, environmental DNA, plastic pollution, water quality, pathogens, and studies focused on park enhancement efforts. Visiting scholars shared findings related to the Gansevoort Peninsula salt marsh, oyster recruitment, and genetics in the park, CSO impacts on microbial community assemblages, and pilot projects utilizing video and image analytics to look at the presence of mobile species like fish and crabs in new habitat enhancement areas. On February 1st, we'll be hosting our annual Estuarine Sanctuary Management Plan Technical Advisory Council meeting, where we will provide a comprehensive review of the year in our sanctuary, and we'll look ahead to upcoming projects, programs, and partnerships. It's approaching a year since the Trust has had access to the Pier 57 Discovery Tank, and it's been wonderful to be newly able to expand both our field trip and public events through the winter months. As part of this series, New York City schools can book hands-on winter field trips to the Discovery Tank classroom, focused on climate change, pollution, environmental justice, and plankton. So far this winter, over 2/3 of our available field trip times have been booked, with 75% hailing from Title I schools. The classroom's high-tech elements are doing a great job of helping our educators expand beyond traditional classroom curricula to create exciting experiences for students visiting the park. Our River Project team is also offering free public-facing programs in the Discovery Tank this winter, including our popular Painting Nature, Ask a Scientist, and guided gallery events. During those gallery open hours, our educators highlight rotating educational exhibits to teach about fascinating aspects of our Hudson River ecosystem. I'll pause again. Okay, last section. In other areas of planning, Trust staff continues to meet with Amtrak and its consultants regarding the Hudson Tunnel project. Recently, Amtrak notified us of the need to remove pile obstructions that once supported former Piers 68 and 69 in order to allow for a below-grade tunnel to operate successfully in the river. The Trust is now working with Amtrak and environmental permitting agencies on the plan for the pile removal. We're also beginning to draft the construction permit for use of park property needed for the Hudson Tunnel project construction, both on land and in a portion of the heliport site and in the water. Otherwise, during January, we met with Community Board 4 to continue and broaden the discussions related to Pier 76 that began with the task force. I'm really pleased to say that once again, all present were willing to engage seriously, creatively, and deeply with the Trust as we endeavor to plan for the dual challenges and opportunities of creating both significant public open space and revenue generating opportunities on this pier, as well as the need to identify outside funding to enable this large pier's eventual reconstruction. We expect to return to Community Board 4 in February to hear their thoughts on potential broadening of the Hudson River Park Act as it relates to various potential revenue generating uses and future planning. Finally, on January 15th, the Trust filed its annual MWBE plan, which this year also included planning for a full 5-year period. The annual SDVOB plan was also filed. Achievement of our goals requires participation from every staff department, of course, but the reporting requirements are also a significant additional job for us. And on that end, I'd like to thank Sean Singh, Sikander Zibri, Lisa Colon, and Jennifer Sosa especially, who spend many hours facilitating both the MWBE and SDVOB programs all year long. Unlike some agencies where there's greater predictability with respect to eligible discretionary spend each year and even each season, there's enormous variation at the park due to our unique mix of operating and capital projects and even the range of capital projects. In certain areas, such as extensive marine construction, there are extremely limited opportunities for MWBE participation. As we approach the end of the fiscal year, we're on track to meet or very nearly meet our 30% MWBE goal again this year. While we do not normally meet our annual SDVOB 6% goal due to a lack of available subcontractors that can perform the types of services we need, we've continued to increase the number of SDVOB contractors that we retain each year. As you're aware, new construction activity at the park will be significantly less this coming fiscal year, so we expect it to be more challenging for us to meet both the MWBE and SDVOB goals. Both the MWBE and SDVOB annual plans submitted on January 15th identify improved processes for outreach to certified firms as potential prime contractors as a means to continue striving for our annual goals. And last, as promised, I'd like to get back to scheduling our next board meeting. We need to approve the budget before the end of the fiscal year, and that is March 31st. And we had asked you all to hold both Tuesday, March 26th and Thursday, March 28th for that meeting. I'll say that Friday, March 29th is Good Friday, in case that has not registered with anyone. At yesterday's finance committee meeting, the preference was to have the meeting on Thursday, March 28th at 4:30, which is more or less our usual time. Could you please let me or Christine Fazio know what works for you, as we certainly need quorum for this meeting.
So it's the 28th, and is there any other?
The other option is March 26th.
So yesterday's meeting, the finance committee, most members could make it 28th. But Thursday 28th was better for like Jeffrey and I think Michael, a few other. You said 28th also.
Yeah, it's fine.
Thursday was better for you as well. So.
But that does not seem to be the case for everyone here. So perhaps we will send a doodle poll around or something like that to let people.
Well, the finance committee is less important.
Sorry?
Sure, so.
Sorry.
But you need a quorum.
We need a quorum.
Yeah, Jeffrey can't make Tuesday. Yeah.
It's always a tough time of year.
And Pernilla can't make Thursday.
Sorry.
You can't make Thursday either.
What are the dates again? I'm sorry, miss.
Tuesday the 26th or Thursday the 28th. And we could look at a different time of day if that helps anybody. In any case, you'll get another email from us, and if you could all please look at it.
And the other option would be go the Thursday before, the week before on a Thursday. That's also, if that works better than the last week of March.
We'll send a
21st.
Yeah, that Thursday.
That works for me.
I may need to change my vote.
We'll send something.
Okay, we covered a lot of ground today. Does anyone have anything else they want to raise or talk about? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you again. I understand that Daniel Miller was not able to attend today, but he asked Robert Atterbury to present the Advisory Council report. Robert?
Thank you. I will try to keep this brief. The Advisory Council met. They are beginning to their annual membership process to solicit new members. If folks have any interested organizations, we should definitely let them know. It should, I believe, that comes to the board later. They also began to discuss some of their future planning for items they would like to discuss in 2024, including open plans, which is a group doing advocacy around the Greenway, swimming in the Hudson River. They would like a presentation from Chelsea Piers, and they're beginning to look again as part of their membership pieces at their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts with their DEI committee.
That was short.
Thank you for that. I will now ask Connie Fishman to present the Hudson River Park Friends report. Connie?
Thank you. And welcome. Oh, she's gone.
Yeah.
Good, because now I don't have to try and pronounce her last name. I'm totally unsure. Hello, everyone. We are it's not still on the screen, but we're so excited for the opening of the playground on Tuesday when, of course, it was not a great day to open, but it was still 20 degrees warmer than the week before. And the kids just within seconds were all over everything and having the best time. And it was such a nice reward to see that. And I want to commend the trust, Kevin, who I don't think is here, for getting this done in a year. We were telling people 18 months when construction first started. And so it was really wonderful to be able to have it done earlier. And the only complaint I had was that I don't know which day was colder, the day we broke ground or the day we opened, but we'll take it. So it was really a really nice day. I just wanted to do a few highlights from 2023 for Friends. Last year, we had more than 110 separate volunteer day events and more than 3,000 volunteers, which is finally higher than our pre-COVID amount, which I feel like even if the world isn't really past COVID, I feel like that part of it is. And we now have 60 corporate members, And yesterday we sponsored our first business council event. This is a group we started to think about during COVID because we couldn't have volunteer days. And so we stole this idea from Central Park and started getting the folks who are our regular corporate members who could no longer volunteer to participate virtually in business oriented discussions. This was our first real, not live event, but planned, other than having cocktails, an event with some substance. We had about 40 people, I think, come. We've got 20 corporations now who are members of the Business Council. Some of them are also corporate members doing volunteering, and some of them are brand new members. And we had a speaking series, first breakfast on sustainability in development and construction and resilient building. Our speakers were Trust Kevin Quinn talking about the development of Chelsea Waterside Park #2 design, along with representatives from Brookfield Properties, Turner Construction, and RXR. It seemed like everybody really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. And we're going to try and do 2 or 3 of these a year with this membership and hope that it will grow. For the 25th anniversary in 2023, we made a concerted public relations effort to get more attention for the park through earned media, social media, in-park signage, and video assets. We had a separate PR firm engaged working on this for about 6 months. And we also, thanks to Cheryl Herman and Noreen for spending hours and hours and hours in the photo archive, did a beautiful outdoor gallery of photos of the park, pre-park from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and today. I think some of it is still out there. Yeah. And it miraculously has survived the weather. We were very worried about vandalism, which didn't happen. So this was a combination of archives that the Trust has, as well as some very nice photography from local Greenwich Village photographers who have been in the community for many years and had their own pictures to offer. And these were really, I thought, made an impact highlighting the change in the condition of the waterfront from the 1970s to now. I hope some of you got a chance to see them. For the first time, following, I would say, about 2/3 of this PR campaign, we broke 2 million website visits, which is a record for us. And on the fundraising side, we got more than 400 new individual donors, lots of them small donors who saw something in the park and for the very first time, clicked on a QR code. And so even though the amount of money was not a lot, I think just the visibility and getting somebody who will walk by and donate $10 and maybe do that over and over again, since these were the kind of people coming to the park frequently. The fall and end of year campaigns that we completed, one in September, October, and the other one was going to be over on January 31st, are so far our most successful. A lot of very new, just small donations from lots more people. And I think for us, this is a trend that we want to continue. And then obviously earlier this week, it was just such a pleasure to see the playground. So thank you, unless anybody has any questions. Great, thank you.
Thank you. So yes, thank you for all of that great news, and especially for the playground. I just want to share that I was just on the internet, looking up restaurants or something, and a news story popped up on the side, and it said New York City's new iconic playground. And I think that the fish, the sturgeon, really are new icons for the park and also in New York. So congratulations.
Thank you. I neglected in her absence to really, I want to extend my thanks to Madeline, who began this with us before COVID, because that was really a big thing.
Thank you for that. So, is there any further business? If not, I now request that the directors move into executive session to discuss personnel-related matters and that we adjourn the public portion of the meeting. The executive session will not include any action items for approval by the directors. May I please have a motion to move into executive session and adjourn the public portion of today's meeting? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That motion is approved. Thank you. The public portion of this meeting is now adjourned. The trust will now stop the recording and the directors will meet in executive session. Thank you all.